The Daily Derech. We are walking the path of holiness.
Hello, everybody. This is Rabbi Marcus Rubenstein. Welcome to the Daily Derech, a special project of exploring Judaism, the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism, the Rabbinical Assembly, and Temple of Aaron. Today is the fourth day after Shabbat Kodesh, the 9th of Tammuz, 5786, corresponding in the secular calendar to Wednesday, June 24th, 2026. We will read Parashat Chukat this coming Shabbat. Let's begin. Me'am Loez. We're going to continue studying this mitzvah of the red heifer in Parashat Chukat. And it's important to look and really understand this mitzvah carefully, even though we can't understand why we're being commanded this. What is the reason behind it and everything? What is the logic behind it? But we can still learn its details and honestly kind of just take a step back and say, how strange is this? And in order to really appreciate the mysterious nature of this particular mitzvah. Today we're going to talk about what happens after a person is contaminated with a dead body and how this would work in a time when we did have access to the ashes of the red heifer. And of course there was a temple in which to enter into that you would be prohibited of entering into if you were impure. Right nowadays, basically, if you're impure with contact with a dead body or of any sorts of impurity, it doesn't really matter in terms of the observance of Jewish ritual now that the temple doesn't exist. So let's go back to a time when the temple existed to understand this mitzvah. What would have happened is usually the person who is impure through this kind of contact would be impure for 7 days. On the third and the seventh day, they would be sprinkled with this ash water from the red heifer. Now, how would they be sprinkled? It was a particular way this was done. They had basically these hyssop branches, which we learned as oregano, or hyssop roots, and they were tied together. 3 of them were tied together, and then they were dipped in that water. Usually there had to be at least one bud and only one bud, actually, on the tip of the root. So these might have been difficult to find in some ways, but they had to be dipped in the water and then sprinkled by kind of thwacking them in the direction of either the person or the object that would be purified. And also, of course, this wouldn't just be for the human being, but it would also be for all the objects that became impure if there was a corpse, if they became impure because the corpse was inside of a building that they were inside of. So everything else, all the objects would also need to be purified as well. This is the way that the purification process worked. Now, it's important to understand that it wasn't the case in which they had to sort of immerse themselves in this water, but rather any sprinkling worked. So if the ashen water just touched their pinky toe, right, just a little bit, or just a piece of their skin for a second, their whole entire body would actually become pure. It would work, which is, again, adding to the perplexity. If this is such intense tuma and impurity, it's amazing how just like a dip in this water, even with just one's finger, actually purifies the entire body. And so too this works with objects as well. It does not need to hit every surface of the object, and I guess you could understand that from a practical extent, that this ashen water was really hard to get. It was really rare, and so this worked as a way of preserving it. But regardless, we don't know that's the reason for the halakha, but just looking at it, that would make sense. So, very importantly, I think one of the things that I found very perplexing is what happens to the individuals who are not necessarily the people who need to be purified from corpse contamination, but are impure because they were busy with making the red heifer. So we learned that one of the most perplexing things that a lot of people know about the red heifer is that the person who prepares the sacrifice famously becomes impure by the making and preparing of the red heifer ashes, while the one who is impure before and then sprinkled with that ashen water, the condition that's made, obviously, eventually becomes pure. But people don't often talk about what kind of purification was required, not for the person contaminated by corpse impurity originally, who the ashes were made for or for, But what about the impurity of the people who are preparing that red heifer? And the halacha actually is interesting. You would expect it to be, well, just take the ash and water from the red heifer and sprinkle some on that person, right? And they'll become pure too, because of course the impurity must be the same in that regard. But actually it's not. The impurity that the person receives who's preparing the red heifer is not corpse contamination, right? There is no corpse actually involved in making a red heifer. Obviously, a cow corpse, but that's not the same as a human corpse in the same way. And so instead, they are actually need to be immersed in a mikvah. And so after they prepare the ashes, they immediately immerse in a mikvah. And by evening, actually, they're pure. So it's a very different kind of impurity than the meinida, the sprinkling water of the cow here, of the red heifer. So again, one other place within the structure of the mitzvah where this is just a really strange mitzvah with some strange laws, and this just adds to the specialness and mysteriousness of this particular law. Mishnah Torah. We'll continue learning the laws of the recitation of the Shema. Today, hopefully, we'll get through the 5th and maybe even the 6th halacha today of the 2nd chapter. Hayosek b'Talmud Torah. A person who is studying Torah, when the time to recite the Shema arrives, should stop to recite the Shema with the blessings before and after it. So, we get the instance where someone is learning Torah, and Kriat Shema, the time has come to say Kriat Shema. Should the person stop studying Torah in order to recite the Shema? Usually, in a case where someone is learning, right, many mitzvot are pushed aside for a person who is learning, right? Because the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, the mitzvah of Torah of learning Torah is so high that it can push away other mitzvot, right? So this happens often. But we actually see that this is one place where the mitzvah, the positive mitzvah, is not put off, right? Rather, the person should stop to recite the Shema, and not only just the Shema, but the blessings in before and after it. Right? The Shema is a Torah obligation, a positive Torah obligation, while the blessings before and after it are just rabbinic obligations that are usually attached to the Shema. So he seems to be saying also say the blessings before and after it, which we know will take more time away from learning Torah. So it's pretty incredible, this halacha of how the sages are understanding this, of saying, actually, saying the Shema at the right time is of higher value and a more important mitzvah than learning Torah. So that's pretty incredible. That puts the Shema very, very high in sort of the ladder of priorities when mitzvot are in conflict with each other. But we're going to learn about one mitzvah that does not trump the Shema in terms of importance. One who is involved in community matters. In the translation, that's the translation of Tzarchei Rabim, needs of the many, needs of the public, should not stop, but rather finishes his work and reads the Shema if there is still time left. What an incredible halacha. So the Rambam is telling us, based, of course, on the Gemara, and actually on a Tosefta, that if you are involved in community needs, and what this means usually is what you're doing depends on you and the whole entire community, or at least a large segment of the community, is depending on you in some way to do that thing. In that case, you're allowed to violate a time-bound commandment like the Shema in order to continue with those matters. But you would expect, since we just said that studying Torah can be interrupted for the Shema, and usually studying Torah is like the highest thing, it seems kind of strange that Tzarchei Rabim, community needs, can interrupt your ability to recite the Shema. And he even says afterwards, if there's still time left, right? Meaning you could have actually missed the mitzvah completely, right? It might be, okay, stop before saying the Shema if you have more time left afterwards. But this is a case where there's no time left. And you might have missed the positive mitzvah of reciting the Shema in the morning, even still. And even still wants to just continue with the needs of Tzarchei Rabim. It's important to read halacha and understanding this way that what the rabbis are saying here is, as important Kriyat Shema is, which we just learned how important it is, that reciting the Shema is super, super important. Most things can be interrupted from it, or we already learned that you can stop working even if you're on an hourly wage in order to at least say the first verse or something like that. We learned that you can interrupt your studying of Torah. You cannot do that for tzarechei ribim, for community matters. And I think that this shows is when the community really is depending on you and you're really doing something for the whole entire community, that really takes precedence over everything else. We are all, in the end, servants not just to God, but to the community. And so when we're doing something for a whole community depending on us, even the most important mitzvot in Judaism often tend to fade out of existence here, at least for the moment. And the central mitzvah at that moment becomes taking care of the community. So I think what this shows is how important in Judaism and Torah taking care of the community, taking responsibility for communal needs are within Torah understanding. Me'am Loez. We'll continue learning the introduction to the first chapter and really getting into God's justice. How does God do justice? And it's amazing sort of how far we've come in this introduction of a work that is supposed to be talking about jealousy, right? And staying away from jealousy. We sort of went to this idea of positive jealousy, that there are positive jealousies. Obviously, there's kinat sofrim, right? To be jealous of a sage or something like that to make you better at your craft, right? That's a good jealousy. But then they begin talking about the good jealousy, which is we would call in English zealousness, to be zealous for God's justice. And they told us a bunch of stories about how humans need to go out on a limb, sometimes putting themselves at danger in order to bring criminals to justice and the problems with that. And that has sort of led us to, well, what about God's justice? If humans need to go out or are supposed to go out and bring criminals to justice, even risking their lives for that, where's God in all this? Why isn't God doing judgment? And so we've sort of gotten into having faith in God's judgment and sort of how God does judgment here. It's interesting how everything is related. It's so easy to get locked in a particular midah, an attribute. Oh, it's just about jealousy. We're just talking about how to remove jealousy from our lives. And actually, that often becomes a large theological discussion about God's judgment, how we go after criminals and after those who do wrong. It's one of the things that makes Menorat HaMaor a really unique text than just like what we might call a Musar book, or a book that's just of midot, of attributes. So this is a text the Menorat HaMaor is quoting from Eruvin, chapter Osin Pasin 22a. And it starts the verse in Deuteronomy 7:10. And he repays those who hate him to their face. And the simple meaning of this verse in Deuteronomy 7:10 is that we should believe in God's justice because God will repay the evil people very quickly for the crimes that they've done and immediately punish them. But actually, it's interesting that the rabbis will read this almost completely differently. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, had this not been explicitly written in Scripture, it would be impossible to say it. It is as it were, like a person carrying a burden on his shoulder who is eager to throw it off. So we first learned from Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi that this is almost like a seemingly heretical thing to say. But the Torah says it, so therefore we can think it, but it would never could be said unless we were given sort of permission to think that way because it's written in the Torah. And so let's actually hear what the rabbinic interpretation of it is. Regarding the verse, he will not delay toward his enemy. Rabbi Ela said it is specifically towards his enemies that he does not delay, but towards the righteous he does delay. And I didn't understand this at first, but after looking at Rashi to understand sort of on the verse itself of what this really means according to the rabbinic understanding, is when it says, and he repays those who hate him to their face, it is understood, unlike what the simple meaning of the text would seem to say, that this is about punishing them for their evil deeds, but actually repaying them for their good that they do. It is believed that the wicked, everybody does at least a little good in this world, and even the wicked do. So for the little good that they do, they're repaid immediately in this world. So God can sort of get it out of the way, and that's what Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi is referring to. Of this idea of God is carrying this intense burden and he just has to get rid of it, right? It's almost like God is delaying or even procrastinating, repaying a wicked person for the little bit of good that they do, because of who wants to reward someone who's done so much evil, but it's only fair that they're rewarded because they've done a little bit of good, and those actions are real. And so God sort of just wants to get it over with. So God repays it immediately, and that's what happens there. It's this huge, it's kind of like weighing on God. He's procrastinating it. He's got a paper due, and so he's smart. He just does it, gets it out of the way. But interestingly enough, and according to, and that's what we mean here, is specifically towards enemies that he does not delay, but towards the righteous he does delay. So we see with what Rabbi Eli is saying is this is only towards his enemies, or the people who transgress very often, but those who are righteous, who are generally good, and they do a lot of good deeds, God delays. God does not repay them immediately, and sort of waits till the world to come in order to repay them back. And that's why the righteous aren't rewarded for their good deeds in this world, only in the world to come. This is what Rabbi Shua ben Levi meant when he said, "What is the meaning of the verse which I command you today to do them?" Today to do them. Today, this is actually the next verse in after Deuteronomy 7:10. This is Deuteronomy 7:11. Today to do them, today is the time to perform them, not tomorrow to perform them. Today to do them, today is the time to perform them, and not today to receive the reward. And that's why the verse afterwards actually says that a righteous person needs to do mitzvot today, as soon as possible, when they come up, but they cannot expect a reward today. They can only expect a reward in the future, maybe even only in the world to come, unlike the wicked person who's paid immediately. From here it is made explicit in the Torah that the enemies of God will be lost in the world to come, as it says, to destroy him. Right? So in 7:10 it says that they will be destroyed. Right? And destroyed can only mean not experiencing the world to come, because that's permanent. This is passing, this world. But the enemies of the Lord shall be like the glory of the pastures. They shall vanish in smoke. They shall vanish away. Meaning, the land looks good for a little bit, right? And it looks very beautiful, but we know the seasons change very quickly, and it vanishes. All that good vanishes. And so all the good that the evil seem to be experiencing in this world will vanish, especially in the world to come. So very important teachings today. And I think really important for us to remember that although you might see someone who's profiting in this world, and it seems like God's not doing justice correctly, I think it's really important for us to say, we should have faith that this good will vanish eventually. It's only temporary, and eventually everyone will get their justice.
Well, that's it for today, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Daily Derech. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to email me anytime at rmr@templeofaaron.org. Thank you so much for listening. There are so many people to thank, and you can look in the show notes for that. And also, if you want to know and see any of these texts in the original, we actually have that too. You can actually find that in our episode description. So look in each of the episode descriptions and you'll find that information right there. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.